So welcome everybody to Ask a Naturalist, the June edition, June 2021. My name's Brett Thielen. Like many of the naturalists here, I work for the Harris Center for Conservation Education. Lots of familiar faces, but if anybody is new to us, we are a nonprofit organization based in the Monadnock region of Southwest New Hampshire, and we help people fall in love with the natural world through land protection, conservation research, and education for all ages. Local folks might like to know we've protected now more than 24,000 acres of land from development, and much of that's open for hiking and birding and paddling and other recreation. We coordinate conservation research on that land and throughout the region through a variety of community science projects. And really at the heart of everything we do is education for all ages, from babies in backpacks to residents of retirement communities and all points in between. And this past year, we've done a lot of that via Zoom, and we are certainly continuing Zooms, especially this Ask a Naturalist monthly program, which has become such a treat for all of us. But if you're local, we're also returning to some in-person programming this coming summer. So we've got mushroom walks and paddles and birding opportunities. So definitely encourage you to check out our summer calendar at harriscenter.org and see what we've got coming up. There's lots of good stuff. So tonight we have Ask a Naturalist. This is the time for you all to send in your natural history mysteries and for us to try to answer them. And so we have the lovely thing about these programs is it's not just one person, it's a whole crew of us who have different areas of interest. And so we're going to do a quick round of introductions for the naturalists and Harris Center staffers among us. So I'm going to start with Miles. You could introduce yourself and maybe give us some tips for Zoom, positive Zoom experience.
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for tuning in on this beautiful evening. So I'm Miles. I'm the office manager at the Harris Center. I try and make sure all the technical aspects move smoothly. And that, enjoy the show.
Okay, Eric Masterson, why don't you introduce yourself and share what you often talk about here?
Hi everyone, lovely to see everyone here tonight. I'm Eric Masterson, land protection at the Harris Center, and I am a bird specialist.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Wilson. I'm the director at the Harris Center, and I usually field questions having to do with trees.
Hey everybody, I'm Phil Brown. I'm the Hawk Watch coordinator at the Harris Center, and I, like Eric, also am a bird specialist, but I'll attempt some other areas of natural history as well, but don't ask me any mushroom questions tonight, please.
That's a great segue into John Benjamin.
Hello, I'm John Benjamin, and teacher naturalist for the Harris Center, and glad to be answering some fungi questions this evening.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Margaret.
Hi, everybody. I'm Margaret Baker. I'm the graphic designer, print communications person here at the Harris Center, and I take each of the pages that we have on our slide deck here, and I try to put them together and make them flow, and it's really fun. So I'm always grateful that people send in information and ask great questions. And I'm really grateful too that if you don't do that, you're just here because Ask a Naturalist nights are really fun. So thank you.
We always like to say that Margaret makes us look beautiful. So thank you, Margaret. I think that's all of us. So welcome all, and take it away, Miles, to our first question. Okay, hiking in Franconia Notch up the Cascade Trail. Along the way back, I saw these little shrooms partially hidden by a small log. What are they? John Benjamin.
All right, well, I guess that's in my wheelhouse there, mushroom question. So this is a really cool specimen here. This is a great example of how it can be tricky sometimes to ID mushrooms from maybe just one photo and not being able to actually look them over in your hand and look at the gills and all these little details of texture and color that can be really helpful for having a really confident identification. So I would say that that's the case with this mushroom. I'm not going to say I can give it a 100% assured identification, but I can make a pretty good guess. And based on the location And, again, all the context of the time of year and location from the ground with some decomposing wood there, and the fact that it's in a cluster, that's some helpful information too. So my guess for this is that these are immature mica caps is what they're sometimes commonly called. It's in the same family as the inky caps. So Copronellus is the genus. And mica caps, if you look closely, and again, I can't confirm with the photo here, but the caps have these little kind of shiny granules, almost like tiny pieces of mica on them. And when they start out, they do have that nice kind of conical shape with that sort of orange cap and the white stalk. And I saw a little bit of those striations, those kind of ridges on the cap there too. So once they get a little older and they spread out, you can really see those little shiny granules. That would be definitive evidence of the mica cap mushroom. But I'm going to give that my best guess for this photo and the sort of immaturity of the mushrooms here.
All right, thanks, John. I think you might be up next too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I got a few mushrooms in a row here.
Good mushroom questions for you. Still hiking in Franconia Notch area, this time out by Echo Lake, found a log with these shrooms. David.
Great. Well, it's nice after the ambiguity of the previous mushroom to have 100% confidence for this one. This is a great mushroom to be familiar with, that you'll encounter all the time hiking in the woods. And it is a polypore, which is the name we give to the shelf mushroom. Sometimes they get pretty big and tough. They can grow year after year, not just for a week or two, like many of the ephemeral mushrooms we have. And these ones just have a really distinct appearance, this kind of big, kind of chunky, irregular look. They sometimes are darker, like, almost like a horse hoof people compare them to sometimes. They have little ridges. There's the bottom. You can see the spore surface there. And you can see, so the one little picture in the inset there, that's a great example of ones you'll often see. And this is called the tinder conk, is the common name, or Fomus fomentarius. It is a saprobe or decomposer mushroom. So the mycelium is a really important one in our local woods for breaking down the cellulose and all the tough material in dead wood, helping to recycle the nutrients back in the soil. And the fruiting bodies there just have this really interesting appearance. It often can be, just kind of chunky, not symmetrical. They get the name tinder conk because in olden times, they were used to not only start fires, they have quite flammable material inside of them that you can cut into strips and use as kindling, but you could even carry burning embers inside of them. The idea, you have a great big tinder conk and you hollow it out a little bit and you put your burning coals in it, you can actually let it smolder and carry that source of ignition to another campsite even over the course of a day or two. So back when ignition and fires were a source of life or death, it was a really valuable tool people could use to actually move their fires around. Also known as medicinal, used for anti-inflammatory and antiviral and bacterial properties. So, it was famously one of the types of mushrooms that the Iceman, that sort of prehistoric man who was preserved in the Alps mountains, and they found him thawed out. He had his little satchel and he had two kinds of polypores sliced up in there. And this was one of them, probably as an anti-inflammatory medicinal. He had a wound from an arrow wound. So he's probably trying to treat himself as he was on the run there with this mushroom. So this is a great one to see. You'll see it. It's kind of white sometimes to gray to sort of dark gray and black. You might even find old ones with holes in it, which means it's not viable anymore, but still hanging on because it's pretty tough. But if you see that nice white smooth surface underneath where the pores are, that's evidence that's still alive and active and sending out spores into the environment. So good one to look out for.
Geez. So, all right, what do we have next? All right, another one for John. I noticed some tiny fungus growing from this fairly fresh scat. Other scat of the same age from the same species had no fungus growing on it. In the hemlock above was the creator of the scat and the freshly nipped twig. That's a good clue. Each bead of the scat bracelet was approximately 3/4 of an inch. Is this fungus species specific to this scat? That's from Pam.
So, all right, cool. Well, I did chat with Susie a little bit about this. This is kind of partially in both of our wheelhouses here with both scat and fungi here. So some of you may be able to identify, first of all, what the scat is based on the shape and the color, and definitely the nipped hemlock twigs. So this is definitely porcupine scat, and it's one that's fun to recognize and pretty distinctive looking with the green color because they're eating largely hemlock needles and twigs when they're in these hemlock trees. So you can still see all that plant material in the scat. And sometimes it's little separate beans. Sometimes it's kind of linked like a little sausage like you see in this picture here, still pretty fresh. So it's certainly from a North American porcupine. And then the question about, well, what is this fungus here, or this mold? And, you know, I'll tell you once again, I'm definitely not going to pretend I can tell you what species of mold or fungi this is. But, you know, read a little bit, and Susie sent me some links, a little bit about, you know, well, first of all, there's many kinds of mold and fungi that will opportunistically, you know, be able to consume the nutrients and scat of different species, and maybe kind of different generalist molds that, hey, they find something that's, you know, partially digested plant material, and it'll just be, you know, a good spot to grow and send out their little fruiting bodies. So there's a species of mold, for instance, that's known to specialize on dog droppings. It's kind of that white crust you might see sometimes if you don't clean up your yard enough. If you have a dog, I think you'll find the old, you know, droppings, and they have that kind of white material. And that is kind of a specialist there. So apparently there are some specialist molds that are, you know, part of their life cycle is designed to be consumed by an herbivore, and the spores do survive in the gut of the herbivore. So it could be a deer, or, you know, porcupine, or some other kinds of herbivorous mammals. And then the spores are just ready to go. You know, the mycelium and the little, well, you know, the fruiting bodies will be able to sprout right out of the scat once it's passed out of the animal, and then be able to, you know, get the spores out in the environment to continue and find another animal. So there's some degree of specialization there. I don't think it's just for porcupines per se, but that said, there are so much diversity of things like molds and microfungi that have such complex, you know, specialized niches that we don't understand yet. I would not be surprised if there are some types of fungi or mold that do specialize on just porcupine and porcupine scat, but in this case, can't quite verify that. So it is interesting that you saw that some of the scat nearby didn't have it and this did. So that might be evidence that the spores were passed through the animal system initially, and then were growing out from that. So that's what I have to say about that.
Thanks, John. It's amazing ecological relationships, and you have one of the toughest jobs. I often answer amphibian questions or sometimes turtle questions, and we have about a dozen or so amphibian species here in New Hampshire, and there's thousands of mushrooms and fungi to talk about. So it's you have a trickier job at Ask a Naturalist than the herpetologists among us, I will say. Okay, we got one more for you, at least one more. This one's from Tony. I was very excited to find my first mushroom of spring on this recently felled beech trunk in Middlesex Fells, Medford, Mass. As you can see, it is growing on the exposed interior of the tree rather than the bark. I was wondering what kind of mushroom it is. Could we ask a naturalist? Spotted it on May 15th.
Cool. All right. So
you.
Yep, another great you know, mushroom specimen here, and this is great. So now we're zoomed in a little bit, and of course the first thing when you find a mushroom you want to do is look underneath. You want to see if it has gills like we have here, or does it have pores? Well, you know, what's the spacing or size of the pores or gills? Maybe it even has teeth. So without being able to see underneath, you know, I wouldn't get very far with trying to identify this, and wasn't even sure if it was a polypore or not. But you know, these are older mushrooms again, so they're not in their prime. They're a little bit weathered. It can be a little bit trickier sometimes to be confident, but I've got a pretty good guess about these, and that's based on, number one, they're growing from dead wood, so it's definitely a, you know, decomposer or a saprobe of some kind. Number two, they're coming out in a cluster. They're kind of, there's a few mushrooms all sprouting out from one spot, and there's some families that are kind of often have that growth form that can kind of point you in that direction. And of course, they've got gills, and then you have those kinds of sort of scales on the top, and it's kind of like almost a shiny kind of yellow, orange, even golden kind of look to it. So based on that, my guess is that this is what we would call a golden foliota, Pholiota. And foliotas are really you know, often in these big clusters. Look at these big bouquets of them. They're pretty, you know, impressive, beautiful mushrooms. When you get fresh ones, you can have a whole lot of them sprouting out of a log or a you know, snag. And the golden foliotas really do have this kind of sort of shine to them. They have a little bit of scales to them, but this is an old specimen, so you know, it's a little beaten up, but the fresh ones can be quite beautiful. And you know, it just goes to show, by the way, mushrooms over their life cycles can change dramatically in their color and their pristine quality, and they can look a little gnarly as they get a bit older. But yeah, the golden foliotas are just one foliota. There's the scaly foliota, which has these cool kind of gnarly spikes on the caps, and they all are these guild mushrooms that grow from dead wood and have these kind of clusters all growing from the same spot. So that's my best guess about this species here. But it's good to see the guild mushrooms popping up. It's a great time of year after the rains to be going out and seeing what shows up, because every day can be something a little bit different. So great to get these photos sent in.
Awesome. Thanks, John. That was great. What do we got next, Miles? Oh, it's a turn the tables. So this is when we ask you a question. And this one is, I think, specifically designed to maybe test some of our long-term attendees, people who've been joining us for a year or more. If you remember what we discussed 1 year ago today, what are we seeing here? And so how are we doing this, Miles? Are people going to answer in the chat? Yep. Okay. And I'm going to put Phil Brown, if you don't mind being put on the spot, you're going to be the judge of who gets the right answer first, because we were talking about this particular thing earlier today.
And the first right answer gets a hat.
And the first right answer gets a Harris Center hat. So get your typing fingers ready, and remember back to 1 year ago when we discussed this plant. So the first person to put their answer in the chat, the correct answer in the chat, will win a hat.
I will say that I think this photo was actually taken in May or even
The right answer has appeared.
last year.
Okay, the right answer, yes, this is probably a photo from May or possibly even late April. Phil, do you want to talk about this?
We had a few excellent guesses there, and yeah, I'd say the 3 species that are probably most often confused were named here, just in the few answers that were out there. So you guys are all in the right neighborhood. But this was a photograph of false hellebore, a poisonous plant of the lily family, and it's an early spring plant that usually pops up around our part of the world in April. Grows along moist stream beds and moist woodlands, up to about 1,500 feet in elevation. So, plenty of those around the Harris Center, and they have veined leaves that they have parallel veins running the length of the leaf, often confused with the skunk cabbage, which has one central vein. And also, it can look a lot like lady slipper as well, which comes out a little bit later. Let's see, one other difference is when they do open up, the hellebore has these clasping leaves, clasping the stem, and skunk cabbage is a little bit more separated from the stem as far as the leaf goes. So look now for the false hellebore to be blooming. This is the time of year along streams for a little white cluster of flowers, and don't eat it.
One thing that we talked about last year was, why is it called hellebore or false hellebore? Is there a regular hellebore? And I looked that up, and there is actually a landscaping plant called hellebore. Small flowers.
Awesome. Well, I'm very impressed with people's memories and naturalist skills. Congratulations, Pam. You win a hat. And yeah, and interesting to think about the timing of these. The false hellebore is that green look, has that green look in April, May, and our lady slippers are just finishing up with their flowering now. There's a really impressive patch of those along the Harris Center's Eastview Trail for folks who are into that wildflower. They're in the section where what looks like an old borrow pit, really sandy soil. There's probably 40 or 50 lady slippers that are just past their bloom now, and before they bloom, they can have this kind of really deeply veined leaf look to them. So, okay, what do we got next? This is from Tony. I shot the following video on June 13th at Lake Nubanuset, which is here in Hancock, down the road from the Harris Center. The merganser flew into the cove, circled, then landed in the tree. Loons were calling back and forth, and one of them swam into the cove. The merganser flew down, landed on the dock, and proceeded to squawk for about 15 minutes, continuing until well after the loon swam away. The loon didn't seem to care about what the merganser was saying. Was the merganser squawking at the loon, being territorial, or just having a nice Sunday morning chat? Any idea what was going on here? It was certainly a lot of fun to watch. So, Miles, can we see the video?
Sure thing. And I will say that the video might not come through crystal clear through Zoom, but the audio is really exciting to listen to. So open your ears and we'll experience this. That's most of the action if we want to start talking about it.
So Phil or Eric, which one of you would like to chime in on what's happening here? Or both of you?
I would just like to comment that there is no contest when it comes to a beauty contest between the merganser and the loon's voice. Not even close. I don't know. That's a tough one. I wonder. So mergansers they're a really large duck, and are we still going with that?
I think you can talk over it unless you don't want to compete with a loon, which is
No,
understandable.
no, that's yeah, right. They're a really large waterfowl, and oddly for such a large bird, they're a cavity nester. They nest in tree cavities. I wonder. So mergansers really should not have any interaction with. They're not a threat to loons. Loons are not a threat to them. They don't. They don't cohabitate. You know, I mean, they'll occupy the same lake, the same water body, but they don't occur together in flocks or anything like that. You'll often see mergansers in large flocks in the fall and the winter, but they really don't have much to do with each other. So I suspect that was just coincidental. I wonder, was that bird calling to chicks that were in a tree, trying to coax them out of the cavity into the lake? It seems to be a little bit late for merganser babies to be fledging, but that's the only thing I can think of. They're not the most vocal birds. That's basically their vocal range that you're hearing there, this low grunt, which you can often hear with flying birds, make that fairly frequently. But that's the only, other than some other unexplained behavior. I wonder, were they calling to chicks in a tree to make the jump? Phil, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree that they're not competing, that they're probably not angry at each other because, there are plenty of fish in the pond here. They wouldn't be threatening each other. I was wondering if maybe there was a bald eagle in view that was around, in view of the birds anyway, that was threatening them, because the loon is giving a call that indicates some sort of unpleasant encounter. It sounds like to me. That's what I would classify that loon call as, a little bit of a warning call. And the grunting of the merganser, I would probably think that also could be related to a potential predator around. So bald eagle is a pretty typical predator of these water birds. There are a lot of eagle-loon encounters that are pretty well documented these days. Eagles taking loon chicks off of nests or lakes. I've heard several reports of that now. Even attacking adults occasionally, but eagles will go after mergansers occasionally. and also the fish that mergansers are feeding on. So in this case, yeah, that would be my take, was that they were just, you know, a little bit alarmed about something or somebody.
And Tony's saying she didn't see an eagle, but she was looking at the lake, not the sky. And I can say from several personal experiences of seeing loons, seeing eagles well before I saw them, and me being alerted to the presence of the eagle because the loons were really expressing a lot of alarm, which I thought, so I started to look around, and then I would see, you know, out of the corner of my eye, an eagle flying across. So they may have been clued into something, and you were, you know, that or was out of our human purview even of being able to see them. There was also a question about, I don't know if she was asking about loons or mergansers, but about, you know, how far south they are found. Loons are more of a northerly species, but what about mergansers? Both of them. She's wondering for both of them. She's zooming in here from northern Georgia and wondering if she can see loons and or mergansers.
Well, loons will winter down to the Gulf of Mexico and Florida and off the Atlantic coast. So they winter, you know, in large water bodies throughout the southeast, mostly reservoirs and lakes that don't freeze, but also oceans and bays. Mergansers also have a little bit of a shift in migration, and you know, certainly winter well south of here. Offhand, I can't recall if they're in Georgia, but they're definitely a northern breeder. Common mergansers are.
Yeah, I don't believe they breed that far south. So no, I don't believe they breed that far south. They do winter. They do winter, as Phil said, farther south. And I can tell you that common loons, which are pretty much a new world species as a breeder, they winter all over to the British Isles and Ireland. And I grew up in Ireland watching these birds. They're very common off the coast in winter, but you never hear them or see them in their summer plumage, because they're gone back to the US or the North American continent by the time they're in their summer finery.
All right, thanks, Phil and Eric. I think we've got a tree question now. This is in Jeremy's wheelhouse. What is going on with our hemlocks? Signed, a concerned Monadnock resident. Jeremy, what do you have to share about this photo and what it is showing?
Well, this is an eastern hemlock, and the white sort of cottony masses that are associated with the ends of the needles as they stick into the branches, what we'd sort of call a petiole in a hardwood, is where you find these cottony masses, and it's a product that's exuded by the insect. Hemlock woolly adelgids were introduced from Asia, I think to the Pacific Northwest back in the 50s, and made their way east. Devastated hemlocks in the southern Appalachians and moved north from there. Hurricane Hugo, they crossed on the wind. They crossed the Long Island Sound to Connecticut and have sort of been making their way slowly north since then. New Hampshire had its first observation of, oh goodness, excuse me. I'm babysitting a dog, so I'm dealing with that. They made the first observation in New Hampshire was in 2000. So they've been here 20 years and slowly expanding in their range. I think they're in every county in New Hampshire except Coos County at this point. But we are seeing an enormous number of them in the Monadnock region this summer. And I asked Steve Roberge about it, and he said that it was because the winter wasn't really harsh enough to kill off large numbers of them. So usually in a good winter here, we'll kill 90 to 99% of the hemlock woolly adelgid. And this last winter didn't do that. And so what we're seeing is a population that's been existing here, but dying quite a bit in the winter. And it's just really sort of exploded this year. You'll find this sort of in any of the towns around here. If you look at enough hemlocks, you'll start to see this, and it's distressing. The typical course of events is that over 4 to 10 years, it can kill the tree, often does. Certainly weakens it during that process. So it's it's a sad story about the hemlocks in our region. What we can hope for is a good, strong winter. Actually, several good, strong winters in a row to really beat it back and give the hemlock some more time.
A follow-up question from Mickey. She's saying, what can we do? Is there anything we can do? Can we cut branches, burn, chip?
There are insecticides that can be used. I mean, you can use a botanical oil on trees that are in landscapes and preserve those for long periods. You can use injectable insecticides or even ground, but you can't really do that in the forest. So no, there's not a lot we can do. Cutting branches doesn't do much because if they're on a lower branch, they're obviously on an upper branch as well. We'll have to see how this plays out. You know, hemlock groves throughout Connecticut were completely destroyed. As you moved into Massachusetts, there was less mortality, and the hope is that the colder temperatures and lower soil quality up here will help reduce the mortality. But we're just, I guess what we're seeing this year is the reality of how bad the infestation is, even though we haven't been seeing it in other years because of winter kill.
And one more follow-up question from Ruth is, why would soil quality matter? Is that related?
Well, adelgids they're piercing, sucking insects. So they're sucking the sap out of hemlock. That's what they live off of. And so you can imagine if a hemlock's growing on poor quality soil, its sap isn't as nutrient rich, which supports much lower adelgid populations. And so the infestation never gets to the same level on poor quality soils as it would on a tree that's growing in good soils. We should have a whole episode on this with Jenna. Because we really need an entomologist to tell us about this. So this is an invasive insect from Asia. It reproduces. It's an all-female population because the males that are produced and become moths, there's the spruce they need to reproduce on isn't available in this country. So this is all done through female reproduction. It's an extraordinary story. Anyway. There's much more to the story than I can relate from the tree perspective, but do look for this. I think you'll see it throughout the region this year, just because the winter really didn't kill off what it should. Oh, I should mention there's one other thing. There's some predatory beetles that have been introduced, mostly on the coast in this region. I asked Steve, he's the extension forester, or one of the extension foresters for New Hampshire, and he said, I said, well, why haven't we introduced the beetle to more places? And he said that, well, it's $10 a beetle. So you put them where you think they're going to have the most impact. And that's mostly on the coast at this point.
Wow. Well, maybe we will bring this back in a future Ask a Naturalist when we've got our resident entomologist and she can talk about it from the insect's perspective. This is a question I sent in. We're moving on to a bird question that I sent in, and then subsequently think I may have found the answer, but would love to hear what the bird experts have to say. This is a picture from the underside of my deck. This year, robins have built more than a dozen nests, really closer to 20, in varying stages of completion under my deck. I'd say 5 or 6 of them are fairly complete. But the birds don't seem to be actively nesting in any of them. I will say a follow-up, after I took this picture, I found that 2 nests right next to each other each have 1 single egg in them, but the birds are not incubating any eggs on any of these nests. So why do they do this? Seems like such a huge waste of energy. Eric or Phil, do you want to chime in before I share what I found on the internet trying to answer my own question? Do you have any thoughts on this? Should I take
the first question I would ask, are you sure that, so I'm familiar with a colony of barn swallows that nest in a very similar structure, and there's multiple nests from many years. And so the question I have for you, are you sure that they were all built this year and that they're not last year's nest and the year before?
I am sure. There was one from last year, but I removed all the rest from last year. And last year they nested in a tree. not under the deck. And 2 years ago, they did this same thing where they built all of this and it was really messy. So at the end of the nesting season, we took it all down. And so I know that these are new this year, and we also watched the birds doing this.
So I did a bit of research myself, and what I was able to find, and I'm aware there are several species that will build multiple nests, either to let the female choose the most advantageous nest, or in many cases to reduce the opportunity for parasitism. If you've got 10 nests, a predator is going to have to luck out. It's going to have a 10% chance of getting the right nest versus if you've got one nest, so to speak. But this doesn't make sense to me. The only thing I feel comfortable saying is the bird that did this is a very inexperienced robin. I don't think this is and I would be surprised if an experienced robin with many years under its belt would do this. It doesn't make any sense to me. But tell me what you found out.
So, well, this is what I found part of an interview with Len Eiserer, who wrote a book called The American Robin, A Backyard Institution. And somebody asked him about more than one nest, and he said, or they said, building multiple nests simultaneously happens every now and again with robins. One started 26 different nests on roof rafters of a garage under construction. Another built 8 on successive steps of a fire escape. Support from underneath is the primary site selection factor for the female robin. It's more important than concealment. So they're not worried as much about being hidden as they are about being in a supportive spot. Because some human structures provide repetitive sites with strong support, the female can get seduced into building multiple nests. He says this is an example of what he calls supernormal stimuli, artificial stimuli that are even more effective than those provided by Mother Nature. So the animals have a hard time resisting all of these great places to nest, is what he's saying. That they couldn't choose. There were so many good places that they couldn't choose, so they chose them all. And he thought that the robin would probably end up settling on just one site and only lay eggs in that one nest, or else only incubate eggs in that nest after laying, say, 1 egg in one nest and 2 in another. But that she wouldn't lay 2 complete sets of eggs and try to incubate both at the same time. In my case, she laid 1 egg in one nest, 1 egg in another, and doesn't seem to be incubating anywhere. Maybe not even, unless it's in the woods. Maybe she opted for a spot that I can't see. But this is the second year this has happened in my yard, but not the second year in a row, which also makes me wonder, is it the same bird? Did last year they come back and do something different, but then skip a year of doing this crazy nest building? So Phil, do you have any, or Eric, do you have any other thoughts, or Phil?
Well, that hypothesis your friend gave, I think, is excellent. It makes an awful lot of sense. It's a really bad strategy for a bird to be adopting, because it's terribly wasteful. So I hope it doesn't do it next year, because that robin's not going to. I'm hoping it doesn't pass those genes on. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, it may be weeding itself out of the lineage. Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on this before we move on to our next question? All right, I guess we're up, Miles. Okay, this is from Eric. I don't know if it's an Eric who's here. I laid out a piece of fabric on my newly cut lawn on Saturday. It was synthetic gray fabric, perhaps, I don't know how to say this word, dacron or something similar. I went back at 5 p.m. to collect it, and dog ticks had assembled at the creases of the fabric. There were about 50 of them. I was shocked because my experience of living in this house for the last 20 years has been that once the lawn is cut a few times, it gets rid of the ticks. It appeared to me that they congregated to this spot, drawn in by the fabric. Any thoughts? Is anyone inclined to answer this one? This is both disgusting and tricky at the same time. Phil or Jeremy or anyone else?
I mean, I'll just say that we're having an incredible wood tick year. And, I was in the woods with another Eric the other day, or Eric Masterson the other day, and I came away with 15 on me. And that's just kind of the norm for this year once you go into the woods and any grassy areas. And So I don't know. Are they searching for a high spot? Is it the shade? I was playing tennis the other day in Dublin, and there were literally 30 to 50 on the court. When a ball sat on the court for too long, you'd pick it up and it'd have 3 ticks on it. And so it's just against what you think of as ticks, is always looking for moisture. So I don't know. That may not help answer this question, but
This was actually, I'm the Eric in this, and one of the benefits of being at the Harris Center is there's so many areas of expertise I can draw upon if I don't know the answer. So I maybe to pass this on to the next one, if Jen is at the next one, I guess I asked this not knowing, can ticks, do they have receptors for, you know, if there was some sort of scent coming off the background, could they, because I had always thought of ticks, I never thought of ticks as an animal that went from A to B to seek out a better habitat. I just thought they found that the highest point to quest from. So I was surprised. What shocked me was that they would congregate in an area, that they would by design go somewhere, and it appeared to me that they were going somewhere, and I was surprised at that. So maybe this is something for Jenna.
It's interesting because we had a speaker a few weeks ago. I don't know if anyone was at the lazy lawnmower talk, Dr. Susanna Lerman, and she was talking about letting your lawn, this research that's done that shows that mowing your lawn every 2 weeks instead of every week is really beneficial for pollinators, especially native bees, that all of those little flowers that grow up in the lawn are really great for bees. And of course, the follow-up question was, but what about the ticks? And if you let your lawn grow, are you going to end up with more ticks in your yard? And they were doing their research in a suburban environment in Springfield, Mass. And they did this whole thing of sweeping, you know, large pieces of fabric through the lawns at all these different, after mowing after 1 week, after mowing after 2, mowing after 3, all these different treatments. And no matter how long those lawns went in between mowing, they didn't find any ticks in those lawns. And a lot of people on that Zoom who were from around more rural areas in New Hampshire said, this may be a difference between the suburbs and our rural environment, because we're pretty sure if you did that in our yards, that's not what you would find out. And you're welcome to come and check, that some of them said. But it was interesting. They were, you know, her finding was that lawns are not good habitat for ticks, but clearly that's not true everywhere. There's some calls for introducing possums. Bring possums to your yard to eat all the ticks. Okay, moving on. Oh, we've got a question here. This is last one, you might remember we had a picture that was showing up in bird feeder advertising that wasn't quite accurate. So now we've got another one sent in by a viewer, I think, right, Miles?
Yeah, also from Amazon.
Also from Amazon. Okay, what's wrong with this picture? Anyone want to throw some guesses into the chat? And I guess we don't know whether these are plastic flowers or supposed to be real flowers. Yeah, so everyone's is Keita, and these look like lily of the valley, which are white flowers. And so these were, so KW must be the person who sent this in. She said this was an ad for seedlings. So if you plant these seeds, you'll get flowers that look like this. Yeah, I can answer this, and anyone is welcome to chime in, but lily of the valley are for sure all white, and you can actually change the color of certain flowers. I don't know if anybody did this as kids, science experiments with carnations, where you would start with white and you'd have color, you know, you'd put food coloring in the water, and then the flowers would take that food coloring up and change into that color, green or blue or whatever. But it wasn't multiple colors on a single flower. I've never seen that happen. So even if you wanted to dye your lilies of the valleys purple, I think you'd get one stem of purple flowers. You wouldn't get Technicolor. And that's not what's happening here on the multiple stems. So don't trust everything that you see for sale on Amazon is, I guess, the moral of this story. Okay, this one is a question that sent in by Jill. Last week, I came across this lovely lady at work in the front yard garden. There were some other dug up spaces, much like the one she was making here. Like we have had more than one turtle laying eggs in our yard, perhaps the daughters of the previous visitor. Do these turtles make test holes? Some of the digs were small and shallow. Also, how long does it take for these eggs to incubate and hatch? When should we look to make sure the babies make it back across the street to the wetland that they probably came from? So this is an awesome picture. And any of you in the Monadnock region, especially these last few weeks, have been just turtle crazy. There are so many turtles out and about heading for nest sites. Exactly what's happening here. Oh, Mickey, a snapping turtle criticism. I don't like it. We'll address it. But so yeah, snapping turtles and painted turtles and wood turtles and all of our local turtles are really out and about right now looking for nest sites. And yes, it's very possible that you could have multiple turtles nesting in the same spot if you live near a wetland and you've got good, loose, well-drained soil in your garden, which is what they're looking for. If that's really good nesting habitat, you could have multiple turtles from multiple species coming up out of that wetland to dig their nests and lay their eggs in your garden. And they also do make false nests. So you might see 3 or 4 scrapes that are shallow before the one scrape that is where the one true nest where they put the eggs. And maybe that's a little bit of what we're seeing here in these photos. And I don't know about whether it would be the daughters of this turtle. These snapping turtles take up to 15 years or more to reach reproductive maturity. So it's a long life for them. And 95% of their nests get predated before the hatchlings ever make it out by raccoons or foxes, even wild turkeys. So it takes a lot of nests to produce one mature turtle. And then of course, these turtles also have to deal with roads and cars and people in other ways. So I wouldn't necessarily assume that it's this, that the other turtles that are coming up are related to this particular turtle, but you have a turtle population in your wetland that likes your garden. And in terms of incubating and hatching, in our neck of the woods, they typically will hatch in September or early October, but sometimes they even overwinter in the nest and come out the following spring. So keep an eye out, I would say, starting in mid-September for the hatchlings. And it is, if you do see them, it's totally fine to carry them across the road and bring them closer to the wetland. That's a pretty dangerous journey for them. But it may be October, it may even be next April or May, or raccoons might find them first. And I see there's a few questions that maybe have come in. So Mickey doesn't like snappers because they can eat ducklings, and they do that, but everybody's got to eat. They also eat plenty of other things, toads and fish. And if you see a turtle, so Ruth's asking, if you see a turtle heading somewhere that is not turtle friendly, what should you do? The other day we had one in our yard heading towards the center of town, which didn't seem like the best plan. That is a really, that's actually a really tough question to answer. So if it's an adult turtle, I don't know if it's an adult turtle, they often are headed somewhere and they have a place in mind. Maybe they were headed for somebody's garden to lay their eggs and knew where they were going. It can be difficult to put them somewhere that they know where they want to go. And so in general, we say to move adult turtles anyway in the direction that they're heading and wish them well. Just get them off the road so that they won't get hit by cars. Hatchling turtles, it's a little different because they are definitely headed straight for water. And so if you can move them closer to water, that's good. It makes them a little less vulnerable to predators on land. I don't know. Every once in a while I get a report from like a turtle wandering around in downtown Keene, and I don't really know what to say about that. But there is Beaver Brook that runs through Keene. That's probably where those turtles have come from. Okay, Pam is writing in, what is the reason for colored eggs? Camouflage can be understood for beige speckled eggs, but what about bright blue? How is the color produced and for what reason? Phil or Eric, you have thoughts to share?
I could take this one. Yeah, it's really interesting. This was a great question, and it definitely led me down a little bit of a road of lots of research that was out there about this topic. There's a book called The Most Perfect Thing, Inside and Outside a Bird's Egg. And the author describes the the pigment that occurs on eggshells as being applied similarly to how a paint gun would apply paint. So, you know, the egg is produced first. The yolk is the first thing that's produced by the female bird, passing it through a single ovary, fertilized by the male in the oviduct. Then the albumin, the white part, is added next. The calcium carbonate shell follows that, and then the pigmentation follows that. And basically, there's just two pigments in bird eggshells. One is called protoporphyrin, and that creates the reds and the browns. And then biliverdin produces the blues and the greens. And it's just all about the combinations of how much and just how it's released by these specialized cells that produces the egg color. So, you know, what a great question, because, you know, thrush eggs like this nest here is either, you know, a robin or probably a wood thrush. Those two species, or that group of species, often produces blue eggs. So why would an egg be blue and not camouflaged or white, which is basically lacking pigment? There are a lot of theories out there, and they're all pretty interesting about the reasons this would be the case. So one theory is that this color may influence other females in the area to synchronize their egg laying, which would help with survival of the species in the long run. You know, having lots of young all at once, maybe avoiding predation on a large scale. So that's one thought. It also is another thought that it would be a signal of the female's individual health, and eventually it's led to this brighter coloration. And then a couple of other thoughts that are, we do know that darker eggshells protect the bird's eggs from dangerous UV light. It also, however, does expose the eggs to more heat. So it's a bit of a balancing act. The eggs could heat up and become, you know, unviable at that point. So, you know, dark eggs could be an advantage. Tend to be more dark eggs in northern areas as well. And then the most interesting theory that I heard was the blackmail theory. It's termed the blackmail theory. The female lays brightly colored eggs to blackmail the male bird into helping with the parenting, because a lot of males don't help with parenting in birds. So, you know, because they're more vulnerable to predation, and you know, they all sound great. I don't think there's any consensus about any of these particular theories, but you know, obviously there's a whole book on the topic and lots of books on it. So definitely worth a little more investigation. Great question.
That's amazing, Phil. The idea of us like a paint spray gun inside a bird of sorts is pretty amazing to think about with the color coming out. We're nearing our end. What do we have, Miles? Do we have one or, oh, we've got another great egg question.
Yeah,
Maybe this will be our
follow-up to that last question.
Okay, a Phoebe egg and egg. How did this happen? The Phoebe nest had 3 white eggs and 2 spotted ones, which were the same size as the white ones. We found this egg on the ground. It was not viable. Phil or Eric?
So this is yeah, this is I think a clear-cut case of brood parasitism by brown-headed cowbird, and the brown-headed cowbird would be the speckled one, and the Phoebe egg would be the white one. And Phoebe is a host species for brown-headed cowbird. Brown-headed cowbirds are a species of blackbird. They're in the blackbird family. They're related to red-winged blackbirds, grackles, orioles, but they don't make their own nest, and they don't incubate their own eggs. They are a brood parasite. They find other birds to do the hard work for them. Perhaps the most famous species in the world that is known to do this is the European cuckoo, which is the cuckoo of the cuckoo call. And in America, the cuckoos we have in America also do it, although not exclusively. They actually more commonly incubate their own eggs and make their own nests. But cuckoos in North America will also do it. So this is, I believe, a brown-headed cowbird. The speckled egg is the brown-headed cowbird, and the white egg is the phoebe. And interestingly, brown-headed cowbirds, one of the physiological adaptations to enable them to be successful brood parasites is the embryo develops more quickly, often more quickly than the host species, so that the bird gets an adaptive advantage. It's out earlier than the host species, being fed sooner than the host species by the parents.
All kinds of intrigue in the nests underneath our decks and in our garages.
Eric, don't the young cowbirds push the other young birds out of the nest sometimes?
Cuckoos do. European cuckoos are famous for that. So the European cuckoo will turn its butt to the edge of the nest and back. It'll reverse its butt out of the nest with an egg behind it and push eggs out that way. I'm not sure, but Phil, do you know if the cowbirds do that? I've never heard that cowbirds do that.
No, I haven't heard that about cowbirds, but the host birds certainly do push the cowbird eggs out occasionally.
Yes, yeah.
Wow, it's kind of a dark note to end on, but I guess here we are at 6:30. So thank you everyone for joining us. Our next Ask a Naturalist, I think, is July 15th, and then we're going to take a small summer break in August and back at it again in the fall, I think. But thank you all for sending in your amazing and interesting questions and giving us an opportunity to learn from each other every month. We really, all of us at the Harris Center, really love Ask a Naturalist, and we're glad that you're here sending us really great questions every month. So thanks everyone, and see you next time.